Can I invite everybody to please take a seat? You can take a little more snack, food, but please take a seat because we're going to get started. Thanks. Where'd Ayala go? Where's Ayala? Oh, okay. Yeah? Everything okay? Yeah. Okay, folks. So, it is a tribute to David W. Bellin's foresight and generosity that his gift to sponsor an academic forum for discussion of contemporary Jewish life in the United States continues to bring insightful lecturers each year to the University of Michigan. As the research project on Jews at Michigan, outsiders, insiders, radicals, and reformers, now being conducted under the auspices of the Inclusive History Project, reveals, David Bellin's 1991 gift to establish this lectureship in American Jewish affairs marked a significant moment in that history, namely when Jews had finally become insiders at the university. He aimed to bring fresh perspectives on American Jews to the academy and to encourage scholars and activists to share ideas. Underlying that assumption was a conviction that such a lecture would generate interest on campus. In short, that American Jews were, in fact, interesting and worthy of study. A distinguished public servant, David Bellin of Des Moines and New York, graduated from the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts, the Business School, and the Law School of the University of Michigan. There is a lovely photograph of him in the Michigan Daily as an undergrad activist working to change the discriminatory bylaws of fraternities on campus. As an American and a Jew, he pursued an exemplary career in law and public service. Bellin served as counsel to the Warren Commission, which investigated President John F. Kennedy's assassination. He also accepted the position of executive director to the Rockefeller Commission, which investigated CIA activities within the United States. Mr. Bellin similarly took on responsibilities of leadership of American Jews through his role as founding chairman of Reform Judaism's Outreach Commission and founding member of the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous. That service reflected his concern for the future of American Jewry, a concern that stimulated him to endow this lectureship over 3 decades ago, actually 36 years ago. Since the establishment of the annual Belin Lectureship, the Frankel Center has hosted an illustrious group of scholars and activists, and this year is no exception. Ayala Fader, professor of anthropology and Jewish studies at Fordham University, is an ethnographer. She investigates contemporary North American Jewish identities and languages. Her scholarship engages key issues at the intersection of religion, gender, media studies, and Jewish studies, as well as linguistic anthropology. Professor Fader is the author of 2 award-winning books, Mitzvah Girls, Bringing Up the Next Generation of Hasidic Jews in Brooklyn, that appeared in 2009, and Hidden Heretics, Jewish Doubt in the Digital Age, from 2020. And we have copies of those books at the back, should you want to take a look at them. Okay. In both books, she brings readers into intimate understanding of individuals and their culture that might have seemed remote and insular. Fader's research has been generously supported by numerous fellowships and grants, including National Science Foundation and the National Endowment for the Humanities. And when I say that these days, it's like, yeah, who knows whether it will ever happen again. She is currently a fellow at the Katz Center for Advanced Judaic Studies, but we don't begrudge her that honor. As the founding director of Fordham's New York Center for Public Anthropology and Sociology, Fader leads the Demystifying Language Project, which makes linguistic anthropology and social justice a resource for public high schools. Actually, it makes linguistic anthropology a social justice resource for public high schools. Professor Fader's new book project, which we will get a taste of this evening, examines the trend of American Orthodox Jews to align themselves with a new form of religion on the Christian right. That is, a public, political, racialized, and biblical philosophy, and as a result, to redefine post-war Judeo-Christianity in the contemporary political landscape. Please join me in welcoming Professor Fader.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here with you all to give the 36th Annual Belin Lecture. I want to thank the Frankel Center for Judaic Studies and Deborah Dash-Moore for inviting me, and Caitlin Gordon for making everything go so smoothly. I'm very grateful to the late David Belin, whose endowment funded this annual lecture, creating such a wonderful academic space to discuss contemporary American Jewish life together. So today's lecture is part of a book I'm working on that studies the growing affinities and differences between Orthodox Jews and conservative Christians in the United States. Using the lens of health, wellness, and media, my focus is the interreligious interstices, the in-between spaces, where Orthodox Jews and far-right Christians encounter each other in their shared concerns over authority, expertise, and bodily sovereignty, despite, of course, their very different histories, cultures, and theologies. This evening, I'll be presenting one site of interreligious encounter, Orthodox Jewish and far-right Christian women wellness influencers on social media. I first learned about what are colloquially called frum influencers, or Orthodox influencers, in an interview with physical therapist Rachel Katz, who suggested that frum influencers are inspired by Christian mommy vloggers, video bloggers, content, and are imitating their formulas. She elaborated, sorry, this is not going, oh, good, okay. She elaborated, Judaism for these frum women is modesty, family values. The Christian values have the same values. There's not much separating them from you. It blurs the boundaries, and it's confusing for frum women. I hypothesize that this blurring of boundaries is part of a broader, often ambivalent attempt by contemporary Orthodox Jews to join an emerging American theopolitical public. And theopolitics is a term that I borrow from anthropologists McAllister and Napolitano to describe the merging of politics and theology as they permeate everyday life, what they call sovereignty from below. Theopolitics reminds us, as feminist scholars know, that politics happen in unexpected places. So let me begin by introducing who and what momfluencers or mommy vloggers are and share a few examples from both Christians and Jews so you have a sense of what I'm talking about. Digital communication scholars define influencers as regular people who draw a large digital following from text and image narration of their everyday lives, engaging with their followers and monetizing them by integrating ads into their posts and appearing at live events. A subset of influencers, momfluencers, are those who produce digital content specifically on parenting, cooking, crafting, and relationships. Momfluencers is mom plus influencers. That's the word. Many momfluencers focus on wellness, a movement originating in the 1970s as countercultural in the States. But today, wellness has become both a lifestyle and an entrepreneurial movement that integrates physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being. Momfluencers emerged in the mid-aughts, and their popularity exploded during the pandemic. The Christian momfluencers I will be referencing are white, far-right Christians, and they include Mormons, evangelicals, non-denominational Christians, and traditional Catholics. So think of women like trad wives, traditional wives, homesteaders, homeschoolers, and fellow travelers. Communication scholars have analyzed these Christian momfluencers in two ways. First, they use mainstream media platforms to shape, normalize, and popularize a far-right political agenda by sequencing images and text to make far-right narratives seem accessible and authentic, often using wellness as a source of their authority. Second, the economic empires and celebrity status that some far-right Christian wellness momfluencers have built is creating new forms of gendered religious authority within the framework of the traditional family. So let me show you two examples of the sequencing of text, images, and in this case music that narrate what we can call a gendered theopolitics. So the first reel I'm going to show you is Gwen the Milkmaid, who is a suburban homesteader. This goes super fast, but I will unpack it for you in the next slide.
Need a dance floor, oh my, good Lord. Someone pour me up a double shot of whiskey. They know me and Jack Daniels got a history. There's a party downtown near Fish.
Okay. So if we have time, I'll show it to you again at the end, or you can Google her. But what you can see is that she's narrating a certain string of wellness, feminine domesticity, and conservative politics and religiosity. So Happy Housewife, From Scratch Recipe, Homesteading in the Suburbs, Conspiracy Realist, Anti-Vax, Holistic Health Nut, Lover of Jesus. At the same time, someone like Ballerina Farm has a huge economic empire with media teams on her Utah farm from which she sells her products globally. Starting about 7 years ago, From Wellness momfluencers who live in the US and Israel also became increasingly popular. And many today have hundreds of thousands of followers. This one is Sarah Lazary, who's a food influencer, and I'll be talking about her a little bit later. Here I'm focusing on Instagram, which has become a platform for frum women in particular, although it's becoming increasingly common to cross-post across social media platforms, including TikTok and on longer-form YouTube channels and podcasts. During the pandemic, frum influencers on Instagram also exploded. Even ultra-Orthodox or Haredi women who may not be on social media or only have a kosher flip phone that only texts and calls can easily and anonymously make an Instagram profile and, quote, read frum and non-Jewish content privately without posting, and somehow that's sort of kosher. The algorithmic affordances of Instagram, that is, the physical properties shaping its use, are critical here. And it's actually something I'm still trying to figure out, me and Meta. Instagram I don't think they're part of that. Instagram automatically suggests related content to its users, facilitating exploration, even while theoretically offering women a chance to look away. And this is actually my Instagram page, which you see I never post anything on because I'm only lurking, but it's suggesting, for example, my son, Simon, to me, and Jill Jacobs. So it seems about right. Although I know not to follow my son. Indeed, in 2022, the growing visibility and economic clout of frum women influencers and businesswomen on social media led rabbinic leaders in New Jersey to hold 2 rallies, one in Yiddish and one in English, warning women about the dangers of social media addiction and exhorting them to close their accounts to protect their families. Apparently, very few did. Like Christian momfluencers, frum influencers also narrate a gendered theopolitics that values traditional family, gender, and God, organized around themes of domesticity, femininity, fashion, cooking, and emotional and physical health. And I'm going to show you 2 reels now. The first is Challah Mom, who's in Israel, and another influencer, Sivan, who's in LA. They're wrapping their hair in scarves and extolling the beauty of Orthodox women and their spirituality. I'll just show you a tiny bit. Thank you, Caitlin, for teaching me how to use your mouse. And then you can see the next slide is Melinda Strauss. She goes by the real Melinda Strauss, and she's talking about baking challah using a pop music selection. It really echoes a lot of what Christian influencers do with sourdough, actually. Whoops. Okay. So frum influencers similarly aim to build economic empires or at least make a living through sponsored products on their posts. And they too are recognized personalities, committed Orthodox women who are claiming new forms of gendered authority, which includes advocating for frum women and girls in Orthodox life. However, though they may be inspired by and follow Christian momfluencers and Instagram culture more generally, and they seem to, the slide on your left is Holistic Mother, who is really sort of paradigmatic of some of these Christian influencers, is followed, you can see on the bottom, Crunchy Jewish Girl says, ooh, I love this. And similarly on the right are a bunch of Jewish influencers that I follow who are also following Gwen. You saw her Suburban Homesteader. I haven't found any evidence that Christian wellness influencers follow frum influencers back, though there are Christian women who follow frum influencers and comment on their posts, and I'll be discussing that. Further, there are important differences that are distinctive to Jewish orthodoxy, including competing definitions of tradition, temporality, which is cultural definitions of time, racialization, and national imaginaries. So this evening, I'll be suggesting that frum influencers' affinities and differences, expressed on and shaped by the affordances of social media, are indeed, as Rachel suggested, blurring the boundaries with conservative white Christian women. More broadly, frum influencers, I hypothesize, are contributing a gender dimension to a theopolitics that is working to make religion in the US public, political, racialized, and biblical. This is a Judeo-Christianity for an illiberal time, and that's an idea I'll return to in the conclusions. So here's a quick itinerary for the rest of the talk. First, I'll briefly give you some background for frum momfluencers as Orthodox Jews and discuss my research methodology as an anthropologist. And then I'll analyze the implicit affinities frum influencers share with Christian momfluencers, their difference and explicit interactions with between frum influencers and their Christian women followers. Okay, so frum influencers embody the diversity of Jewish orthodoxies today, and I'm using this admittedly overly general term consciously to highlight that social media is creating an unusual space for the intimate encounter of orthodoxy's diversity. From modern Orthodox to ultra-Orthodox, Jewish orthodoxy includes a wide range of religious and cultural practices, though all commit to living according to Jewish law or halakha. Most frum influencers are Ashkenazim, though Instagram is also a place for interactions with some prominent influencers who are Sephardi or Mizrahi or mixed, both in the States and in Israel. Those frum Jews who are Ashkenazi generally arrive to the United States from Eastern Europe after the Holocaust to rebuild their communities, determined to maintain their distinction from non-Jewish society, which was only made possible by their participation in local, state, and federal economies, politics, and expressive culture. Since about 2019, I've traced the ways that some Orthodox Jews have shifted their political positioning in the United States. Haredim in particular have gone from engaging a discourse of minority rights to one of religious freedom, and this has supported their growing alignment with far-right Christians. For example, Orthodox Jews overwhelmingly supported Trump and support Trump. Haredi men publicly protested mask mandates during the pandemic, and the Orthodox Union brought religious freedom lawsuits to challenge synagogue closures alongside the Catholic Church. Simultaneously, since the measles epidemic in 2018-2019, and especially heightened during COVID, Orthodox women have expressed a growing suspicion of medical expertise, especially vaccines, as part of their increasing participation in wellness and alternative health. These shifting political alignments are occurring in and supported by a gendered participation in an ever-expanding politically conservative Jewish mediascape. From talk radio, this is Ben Shapiro, to podcasts, YouTube, X, and to the topic for this evening, from influencers on Instagram. In short, rather than a more transactional relationship with the Christian religious right since World War II, there is a growing ideological affinity. A July 4th flyer that circulated online from Agudas Yisrael, the Orthodox Jewish Union, stated, "As American Jews, we are more grateful than ever to the country that defends our religious freedom, defends our communities, and defends Israel." This contrasts to even the previous generation of Orthodox Jews, who are now in their 50s, who, as one woman said to me, this is a quote, "We were raised to feel that we're in Gullus, or in diaspora, that this is not really our country." So how, as an anthropologist, do I study these kinds of changes I've described using the case study of Frum influencers on Instagram? Anthropologists use ethnography, participant observation, both participating and observing, where community members go, what they do, and what they say. I began researching the Frum influencer world in summer 2024, and I've been following networks of influencers, saving and analyzing posts and comments, and interviewing Frum and Christian influencers, which I'm still doing. I've gone to Jewish and Christian wellness in-person events where influencers were the invited speakers, as well as analyzed media coverage of influencers in Frum women's magazines, podcasts, and in the more mainstream Jewish media. In all my ethnographic research over many years, I have also had to negotiate my own ambivalent positioning as a mostly secular Jewish anthropologist working with Frum Jews. And it is this uncomfortable positionality that I continue to find both productive and challenging. So now I'll turn to some of the Frum influencer content and practice, first considering what they share with far-right Christian momfluencers. Frum influencers I've spoken to see themselves as bringing non-Jewish material, ideas, or trends to their Jewish followers, as well as producing Jewish content. As one influencer told me, quote, "I view myself as somebody who filters in or creates something new in the Jewish world. I'm not looking for inspiration in the Jewish world." Women I've spoken to suggested that even very Frum women use Instagram as a place to explore all kinds of Jewish and non-Jewish posts, which is implicitly authorized by the many Frum companies who advertise on Instagram and across all social media. I even recently heard about a group of Hasidic ladies on vacation in Florida discussing heated rivalry, which is the steamy hockey gay romance that was all over social media a few months ago. Like Christian momfluencers, Frum influencers sequence images, text, and talk about religious homemaking, bourgeois consumption, wellness, alternative health, connection to land and nature, and politics. These shared topics in the platform vernacular of Instagram, that is, the shared communicative and aesthetic practices particular to Instagram, creates a narrative linking religious, feminine domesticity, consumption, and conservative politics. At the same time, the Jewish signs, images, objects, music, and languages, Yiddish and Hebrew, though always translated, that Frum influencers use infuses a kind of familiar heimishness or hominess, meaning orthodoxy, into their posts. So I'm going to give you 4 different examples of what I mean. First, like some Christian influencers, there are Frum influencers who call themselves homesteaders or suburban homesteaders. They share an investment in cultivating what Homegrown Kosher, a suburban homesteader in Muncie, calls, quote, wonder in the world and a connection to the land, but as an American Jewish Orthodox practice. And I'll show you a short reel, I won't show the whole thing, by Jar of Fireflies, a very popular Chabad influencer who works in her garden as part of her Orthodox life, connecting to the earth, visibly engaged in prayer, preparing for Shabbos, and ending her day by going to the American ritual of a July 4th barbecue.
Hello and welcome to a day in my life as an Orthodox Jewish mom living in Texas. Today is 4th of July. I start my day off per usual with a ritual hand washing, getting my coffee ready, and sitting down to do my tefillah, my prayers. Once I'm finished with that, I head out to the garden to enjoy my progress that I've made so far, finish my coffee, and then get back to work. All week long, I have been weeding
I'm going to switch you to her Shabbos
cherry
prep.
kugel and a potato kugel today. Then it was super hot later in the day. It was like 109, you guys, but we went out to a friend's house for a barbecue. We had so much fun. It was a really fun cookout. We got home. My husband put the kids to bed.
Okay. You get the general picture. Second, there are many Frum influencers who sequence images of and talk about the therapeutic framework, consumption, and Jewish Orthodox practice. So here you have Homegrown Kosher again posting about self-care with a link to her sweater pattern for purchase. While she's knitting, you can also buy her same sweater pattern. And Crunchy Jewish Girl, who promotes health for her, quote, Jewish girlies while they can earn money on their phones. The narrative sequencing reframes consumption as part of wellness, particularly self-care, while positioning the influencers as trusted experts followers can rely on for getting the best products and services. Third, images of and talk about kosher food and cooking is sequenced with talk about Jewish religiosity. This is Peas Loving Carrots, a Hasidic food influencer in Israel, who opens every post with an earnest prayer that Messiah will arrive today, but if the Messiah should tarry, if Mashiach should tarry, she's posting a delicious set of recipes that she pre-recorded. Peas Loving Carrots juxtaposes a temporality of messianism with the everyday cooking to feed a Jewish family while one waits. So fourth, some Frum influencers, like Christian influencers, subscribe to right-wing conspiracy theories, which they post adjacent to their domestic content like recipes. These are most often in the stories feature of Instagram, the posts that delete after 24 hours, so you really have to pay attention. Conspiracy theories spiked during the pandemic around debates over vaccines and quarantining, and I followed it for the entire lead up to the November 2020 election. Sarah Lazary, a food blogger, for example, had a live interview on Instagram with Dr. Zelenko of hydrochloroquine fame, and later posted about how she was attacked by some in the comments. Note the similar language to, quote, do your own research and promoting common sense over biomedical expertise. Both Frum and Christian influencers have the potential to become a source of trusted knowledge, experts based on their gendered lived experience with the authority to advise other women. I have rarely seen Frum influencers recommend that their followers ask their rabbis or a husband for permission to either follow or buy their linked product recommendations, which is actually a common discursive move in other inspirational lectures that I've gone to for women. Crunchy Jewish Girl did post about asking her rabbi about the kashrus of some of the supplements she promoted. Nevertheless, like their Christian counterparts, Frum influencers seem to be claiming the authority to influence other Orthodox women about issues pertaining to their area of authoritative expertise, taking care of themselves and their families, physically, mentally, and spiritually. The shared topics, narrative sequencing of politics, consumption, and religious domesticity, as well as claims to expertise as Yiddish imamas, is creating affinities between them and the world of Christian influencers. However, there are important differences between the posts of Frum and Christian influencers, especially around Israel advocacy, anti-Semitism, temporalities, and healthy lifestyle food preparation. These foreground Frum distinctions from Christians in terms of theology, histories, racialization, and the national imaginary, implicitly challenging far-right Christian assumptions of what constitutes an American public religion. And I'll share 4 examples to show you what I mean. So first, since October 7th, Frum influencers who often claim that they don't want to talk about politics, nevertheless have explicitly and loudly expressed support for Israel. arguing that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Some use their platform to raise awareness about anti-Semitism globally, posting about recent anti-Semitic attacks. This politically aligns them with some on the Christian right, although there are cracks in Christian support, as we're all aware, for Israel, which is evident even in the world of momfluencers. So Soul of Sydney says, nowhere in the Bible does it say to support a Zionist country founded in 1948 by the Rothschilds, by the way. However, what I see uniting the diversity of Jewish orthodoxies today is women's unwavering support for Israel and assertively calling out anti-Semitism globally on From Instagram. So this is Lizzie Savetsky. She's modern Orthodox and she lives in New York, and she's perhaps one of the more extreme cases of an influencer who's deeply embedded in American popular culture. But a surprising range of Frum women that I've spoken to, including Haredim, know, follow, and like her posts. She also is a conspiracy theorist, and you can see that in her on the right-hand side where she's doubting the outcome of the voting. But she posts herself in a bikini. I was surprised that a lot of Haredi women are into her. Other examples include prayer circles, group prayer circles that some influencers initiated for the hostages, and sequencing kosher recipes next to posts of bring them home, or placing yellow ribbons in the corners of their recipes. This is a gendered theopolitics where Frum influencers' posts on Israel and anti-Semitism I see as part of the broader American parental rights movement, sort of like Moms for Liberty. In this case, some Frum women deny that this is political activism, and they frame their posts as maternal protection of their Jewish families. Second, unlike Christian influencers, Frum influencers do not express nostalgia for return to either an American frontier, where these Jews never were, or to the memory of Eastern European shtetl either, the shtetl. In fact, when Homegrown Kosher told followers in a post on chicken soup that many people were incorrectly cooling their soup by leaving it out, she said, "It's not your fault. Maybe that's how your grandmother or your mother did it." She explained that what we know now about food science and the new technologies, that old ways could actually be dangerous. Third, images of food prepared by Frum influencers are unsurprisingly distinctive from that of Christian influencers, which scholars note include pre-industrial grains, raw milk, and grass-fed beef, indexical of or signifying pre-industrial nostalgia and whiteness. This is Jasmine Dinas. Maha, or Make American Healthy Again, right? Maha moms also frequently post themselves making American fast foods from scratch to both please and protect their families, always including a critique of big agriculture. Although it is only because they have the time and resources that they can do things like make goldfish from scratch, which is something Gretchen does. I don't know how she did that, actually. In contrast, Frum influencers rarely use discourses of healthy or organic foods, and they don't seem especially interested in making foods from scratch, though I'm hearing lately that many Frum women are big supporters of RFK Jr. and the Mahav movement, with some saying that RFK Jr., quote, sees us, and calling themselves crunchy moms. Instead, Frum influencers feature a repertoire of kosher foods that root through Israel as the final American frontier, with food and recipe posts referencing the reality of a transnational Jewish orthodoxy and its ambiguous, what journalists Rachel Shabi and Rachel Feldman and I have also called off-whiteness. For example, Frum influencers frequently post traditional Ashkenazic food. This is from Sarah Lazari's page. Traditional Ashkenazi food like brisket and schnitzel, cosmopolitan and American food like mac and cheese, French onion soup, and Israeli or Middle Eastern dishes popular in Israel. This is a global Orthodox kosher cuisine that reframes tradition in America to include contemporary Israeli, Middle Eastern, and nostalgically Eastern European dishes and taste, present and past. What Frum influencers emphasize is cooking delicious and nutritious kosher food fast. And here I'm thinking that kosher food embeds its own notions of health to be spiritually healthy as well as, quote, delicious. Food influencer Sarah Lazary told her followers that they must try a coffee creamer that she just created that's kosher for Passover, adding as an afterthought, and it's even healthy. More generally, Frum influencers tend to talk about, quote, hacks for making kosher food preparation easier, especially since a lot of Frum women work outside the home. It's very common, for example, to use frozen kosher vegetables or prepared sauces, dips, and spread, with the one exception being baking challah from scratch as a continuity of gender tradition. So rather than a return to the pre-modern American frontier of Christian influencers then, Frum influencers embrace modern technology, which makes it easier for them to cook kosher food for their families, as Frum Jewish women always have. Further, if Frum influencers do express nostalgia for a pre-modern Jewish time in Eastern Europe, there are modern forms of consumption that are available to women as a solution, again in a nod to upward mobility and expanding the bourgeois sensibility of Jewish orthodoxies in the United States. Hasidic influencer Razy Fried, for example, profiled a bakery in Lakewood, New Jersey, where a Yiddish-speaking Hasidic Israeli woman sells her Heimish baked goods. In an interview, Razy told her followers that this woman's baked goods are what she would make her family if only she had time to bake. Frum influencers' authority and expertise is legitimated by helping other Frum women to do it all, often through consumption, labeling their brand empowerment rather than feminism. Finally, I turn to a different dynamic, which involves Frum influencers explicitly discussing what they call Christians, or directing their comments to their, quote, Christian followers, many of whom turn up in the comment sections of their posts. These online interactions are turning Christian women into potential interlocutors or conversational partners. The possibility of interaction further frames Orthodox Judaism as a legible religion parallel to, but theologically distinctive from conservative Christianity. That is, Frum influencers are presenting Jewish Orthodoxy as an American religion whose distinctions from Christianity must be acknowledged as part of the American value around religious freedom. In some of my earlier work, I wrote about how Hasidic children were socialized to fear and avoid interaction with or influence from non-Jews, commonly referred, I guess, in the pejorative as goyim. Like kids play Yid and Goy sometimes instead of cops and robbers. Frum influencers and some of their followers do sometimes articulate anxiety about the dangers of exposure to explicitly Christian content. One woman even suggested that Frum women like Mormon influencers post best out of all the Christians because they don't use the word Jesus often. I've also seen anxiety expressed on Instagram over potential missionizing by Messianic Jews or Christian Zionists. One Frum influencer, for example, warned her followers that not all posts that look Jewish are written by Jews, suggesting that Christian proselytizers may be lurking online, and she posted this link to an organization, Beinenu, that calls out Christian missionizing. Nevertheless, the affordances of Instagram create opportunities for ambivalent interaction with Christian momfluencers, which may be changing the category of goy altogether. For example, in a long-running WhatsApp group that I have that's part of my research practice, some suggested when I asked that some Frum Jews are only recently recognizing the piety of some Christians. Chaya said, it's funny because lately I've heard people say that, some Goyim are actually Frum in their religion. It's totally news to them that some Goyim are actually religious and have morals. My Orthodox interlocutors have described Beseda or higher class Goyim when I've asked them to elaborate, speaking to how class and education among non-Jews might even mitigate racial differences. One doula I've been speaking to told me that she thinks Frum Jews today are less afraid of Goyim and their influence than they used to be. Another, in response to my questions about exposure to non-Jewish content on Instagram, DM'd me a Hebrew saying, Chochmat begoyim tamin, Torah begoyim lo tamin, which she explained to me as meaning you can trust Goyim when it comes to knowledge, except evolution and global warming, not when it comes to spiritual matters. Hasidic influencer Razy Fried gives an example of the potential for opening a channel between Frum Jews and religious Christians during an amazing interview she did on YouTube with media personality Frida Wiesel.
That most of my viewers, most of my subscribers are religious women. Sometimes I get messages, I'm Catholic.
Whoops, you can't really hear that, can you? Sorry, what she's saying is, sorry, that's too soft, but what she's saying is that there are non-Jewish women, there are religious Christian on my site, and they say, can I join? And I say to them, of course, there's so much that we share, of course you can learn. We share family values. So by welcoming Christian women to her site, Razie Fried interpolates, that is, turns them into conversational partners as part of her audience, as potentially ethical women who are also seeking spiritual inspiration. She notes there's so much that we share, especially family values, though she assumes that this sharing is only going one way, from Jews to Christians. The comments on the Razie Fried interview by Christian women followers are typical of the philo-Semitism, the problematic love for Jews and Judaism, which is common to Christian followers of Frum influencers. I'm just going to read the bolded part at the bottom, but you can read the rest for yourself. One of them says, our two faith traditions have so much in common, including the hurts and pain that has been part of the religious experience. However, what is more common than finding affinity is Frum influencers articulating theological difference from Christianity and putting limits on Christian philo-Semitism, what philosopher Elad Lapidot defines as anti-Semitism and what he calls a form of anti-Semitism. I'll share 3 different examples where Frum influencers directly address their Christian followers about religious difference, which is, I suggest, another way to create Christian interlocutors. So first, some Frum influencers addressed negative comments posted by their Christian followers about Jewish practice, invoking shared religiosity between Frum Jews and conservative Christians. So when a follower mocked the Jewish ritual that includes a form of chicken sacrifice for Yom Kippur, Shlugen Kaputis, on Melinda Strauss's page, she responded angrily, and I'll read this. Christian leaders have tried forcing Jews to convert and persecuting us for refusing. We're now living in a time where religion as a whole, especially Christianity and Judaism, are being attacked, and you would think there would be less of this, especially when we all have some strange customs. Other Frum influencers explicitly aim to educate non-Jews and secular Jews about Jewish orthodoxy to fight against anti-Semitism. Chabad influencer with over 1 million followers, I'm sure many of you know her, Miriam Ezagui, opens each post with a different question a non-Jewish or non-observant Jewish person might have, and then says, "Hi, my name is Miriam, I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I share what my life is like." In an interview on YouTube, she explicitly stated why she became an influencer.
Non-Jewish people that watch my videos, I get a lot of positive comments about how they've learned so much about the Jewish religion through my shares. And really, one of the reasons why I started sharing online was to demystify Judaism, because I find that a lot.
Third, some Frum influencers address the theological distinctions that separate them from conservative Christian, demanding tolerance for their religious difference. Homegrown Kosher, for example, addressed her non-Jewish followers one day as she defended her support for an Israeli organization which she described as having a Torah perspective on abortion. She said, "When I talk about this Jewish perspective on life and pregnancy, it makes some Christians upset. And I'm sorry, this is the Jewish perspective, you don't have to like it." Homegrown Kosher and others use their significant platforms to educate about Jewish Orthodox difference, even as they make claims to a shared theopolitical project. This project, however, seems like it is only for some religions and people, that is, white Christians and Jews. I have not, for example, seen any interactions between Muslim or Black Christian influencers and Frum influencers, or mention of shared values around things like modesty and veiling. In the course of research, I've been asking Frum women about their perceptions of race and getting very complicated answers, and this is something I need to unpack further. Most seem to feel their visible religiosity marks them as not quite white, especially because, at least on the streets of New York, it is most often Orthodox Jews who experience everyday anti-Semitism. So, to conclude, Frum influencers and their followers are perhaps unintentionally fostering affinities with Christian momfluencers through their lived experience of Instagram. Their digital practices are developing a gendered theopolitics of religious domesticity, especially health and wellness, conservative politics, and capitalism. At the same time, Frum influencers on Instagram are bridging Jewish distinctions over shared commitments to a religiously Orthodox life in all its diversity, defined in part by support for Israel as part of the gendered obligation to protect families against rising anti-Semitism. However, Frum influencers also articulate important points of difference from Christian influencers. They use different narratives than Christian influencers about what constitutes tradition, about the relationship to nation and history, the validity of Jewish theological difference, even what constitutes delicious and healthy food. They also sometimes direct their Christian followers' comments about these issues, which I suggest opens up a conversation about contemporary Judeo-Christianity more broadly. That is the shared effort to have an American religion today that is public, political, racialized, and biblical. The concept of Judeo-Christianity originated in early 19th century Germany as a term for Jewish converts to Christianity. Since then, as historian Helen Gaston notes, the term has, quote, been deeply contested and served a wide range of religious and political purposes. Historians agree that in the US, from the 70s on, the discourse of Judeo-Christianity was taken up by the Christian right, supporting, quote, family values, and after 9/11, against both racialized quote, radical Islam and secular humanism, with Israel advocacy part of an imagined American Christian democracy. As part of this agenda, the Christian right has also, since the 70s, done outreach to Orthodox Jews in the States, inviting them to reframe their religious exceptionalism in the service of American exceptionalism, with mixed results. However, in the past decade or so, Orthodox Jews, particularly men in leadership positions, have been more actively engaging with the Christian right, sometimes even using the discourse of Judeo-Christianity for their own purposes. Mishpacha magazine, which is a Frum magazine, reporter Raphael Hoffman wrote in 2025 that Orthodox Jews are not just lobbying now, as they have in the past, they are a growing presence in what he defined as hashing out fundamentals of conservative thought. Indeed, at the recent 2025 National Conservative Convention this year, one rabbi was quoted as saying, "The believing Christians here are the only ones who truly want the type of America where we can be open about what we believe. The authentic Torah Jews support their work and care deeply about the moral state of America." Frum influencers do not use the language of Judeo-Christianity, nor do Christian influencers. However, I'm suggesting that Frum influencers' Instagram practices are in fact implicitly contributing a gendered component to elaborations of contemporary Judeo-Christianity by creating the possibility of conservative women, Christian women interlocutors. This is, as Rochel, the physical therapist, suggested, blurring the boundaries between Jewish and Christian women through a shared commitment to a certain type of religious America. An insightful Frum woman framed the change this way to me. She said, "Jews and conservative Christians maybe were aligned before, but over Israel. Now it's because Jews are feeling more American, and that's manifesting as aligned with religious faith. This religious faith, I suggest, engages with the concept of Judeo-Christianity to build a public political American religion authorized by the Bible and only for those who live by it." Finally, I'd like to acknowledge that the politics of anthropological research, and especially with those whom we scholars share space, history, and memory, has never been more complicated. Susan Harding, writing about Jerry Falwell decades ago, remains a touchstone for anthropologists who write about what she termed the repugnant other. Some contemporary anthropologists who write about repugnant others today often rhetorically stake out their own political positioning using ethnography as critique. I remain more ambivalent about that and the Orthodox Jews I have spent decades in conversation with. I'm hoping that this uncomfortable positioning, implicated yet critical, might offer an ethical form of scholarship, an ethnography of deep listening across difference. Perhaps this can even be one hopeful way forward in the current political moment we all find ourselves. Thank you. I really look forward to any questions, right? Sure. Kara.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating. So one thing that, I admit I do not spend that much time on Instagram, but in my Instagram time/the images that I saw, I was really struck by like different expectations of bodily aesthetics.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like every
ballerina form.
The ballerina, right?
Yeah.
There were definitely some, I mean, there was the like bikini,
Right.
modern or like that, whatever. But in general, there was a vastly different kind of aesthetic, and I was wondering if you could unpack that.
Yeah, sure. I know. I'm really interested by that. Some of my early field notes are like, why do these frum influencers all have the same hairstyle? Because they have, you actually don't see it right here, but there are many frum influencers who are not modern Orthodox, who are Haredi, who have long, luxurious wigs, really like flowing, amazing tresses like that Jewish family, like amazing wigs that are very similar to a lot of the Christian influencers, in fact. But
It's time. Like, part of me is like, they have time.
no, I think it's their communal aesthetics more. Yeah, I don't think it's just time because I don't know. No, like you just put on your wig, you know?
The wigs, but the ones that are not.
The ones who are wearing tichels, and so you have a whole range. I guess I could actually do a bodily aesthetics, like a continuum. But you have some of the Chabad women who are, it depends what they're, let me interrupt myself. It depends what they're doing on Instagram too. When they're doing a day in my life, it's very casual and they're, you know, at home. And I think especially with some of the Chabad women, they're like being relatable, right? However, you have someone like Razi Fried, who's a Hasidic influencer who has her own app and everything. She's wearing a very Hasidic, like she is very distinctive from someone like Sarah Lazary, who has a very fancy lace front wig that's all human hair and probably costs $15,000. And she wears that while she cooks. So it's reflective of both the range of diverse Orthodox aesthetic, and I think probably the platform, like what the genre of what they're doing on Instagram as well. But I'm always struck by the diversity of all of these frum women who are watching each other. Like I was shocked that frum women would look at the modern Orthodox, some of the modern Orthodox women who are not upholding the same levels of tznius, of modesty, right? Like wearing very different kinds of clothes and shoes and wigs and all of that. But I do think that's one of the draws, is that you can see the range and they're all frum women and they're following what you're following. And I think that's bringing them together, even as it's crossing a boundary with a lot of the Christian influencers. Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of crunchy ones that you didn't see, that don't have makeup and are homesteaders and look, there's a lot of cottagecore, like Laura Ingalls kind of vibes, you know, which is a very different aesthetic from Jewish Orthodoxy. Like even Razi Fried's kitchen was like all pure white marble. Like it's not a country kitchen. That is not the thing. So it's reflective of many things. Yeah, Shachar?
Okay, thanks. This is really, really fascinating and it's a whole world that I didn't know. I think the question is really about the interaction between this world that you are describing and other folks that we might, some of us, as scholars, might be more familiar with. So I was thinking about this group of mothers, like the Mothers Against College Anti-Semitism.
Oh yeah, that's one of my topics, yeah.
I'm wondering about the interaction between these individual women who are influencers and then they have all these, and what happens when these women try to organize together and do effectively or
Yes.
ineffectively, you know, again, using social media. And my other question, you touched on it a little bit by talking about magazines like Shulchan
Right.
but I wonder if there's interaction between these individual women using Instagram and kind of more mainstream media, whether it's Haredi or, you know, secular, something like Tablet Magazine.
Yeah.
You know, because politically, sometimes there are
Yes, yes.
it's a very kind of distinct politics that these individual women. So
Yeah, those are great questions. Thank you. Actually, this image is stolen from Tablet Magazine. There's a really good article. And Avital Goldschmidt, I forgot her last name, Chizik, also wrote a great article in the foreword about frum influencers. But I'm also interested in like media broadly conceived. So, and I don't want to spend all my time on Instagram. So I've been kind of now putting the research more horizontally in terms of other forms of media besides social media. And I'm finding a lot of podcasts, like From Podcasts, not a lot, but some From Podcasts who are taking on the issue of influencers. I think what's been really interesting and sometimes disruptive in the From world, if you can say such an overgeneralization, is that people are noticing like women's power and influence from social media. I was just at the Religious Liberty Convention in Washington, D.C., because it was about anti-Semitism and health, which is almost all Christians with a few Jews, and there was a guy from Aguda there, and I said, like, you know, it seems like there's a coming together of ideologies here with far-right Christians, and he's like, well, you have people coming in from outside, but you also have those influencers. Like, I think people are concerned that influencers are not, are having an impact and a kind of, an impact that is uncontrollable. So I heard a really interesting conversation. I think it's David Lichtenstein. He has a podcast, and he was interviewing Shay Chaya, who is a cook and an influencer. And he was asking her, like, what's your responsibility to the Frum community? Like, how do you make sure that you are ethical? And there's a whole genre of posts that Frum influencers make where they sort of unpack, like, what's real and what's not real. I haven't seen Christian influencers do that. I don't know if they do that. It seems like there's a kind of moral responsibility that some of the Frum influencers are speaking to. I haven't, and I re-listened actually to that Asifa against social media that happened in 2022. It's not specific to Instagram. It's like, get off the internet. You know what I mean? So the rabbinic authority there is not really with the program, as far as I can see. Like, they know there's something going on, but I don't know if they're immediately targeting it, which I think is really interesting. Now, to the collaborations, that's also super interesting. So I keep wondering, I was just telling this to Ayelet, like, is MACA part of my research subject, Make America, it's Mothers Against College Anti-Semitism? Apparently no relationship to MAGA, but whatever. So I've been going to a bunch of their events. I just went to a lunch that they held. And they're also on Instagram, and I see that some of the Frum influencers follow them as well. But they're also really interesting offline, like face-to-face events where influencers have collabs where they work with other influencers and go places and promote things. So, like, you can have a bunch of Frum influencers go to a restaurant and eat dinner there, like all your favorites. It's sort of like how the Disney princesses suddenly got put together on diapers, you know? Like, my daughter called them the three girls. It's like, I want that with the three girls. Like, it's a new kind of branding, I would say. So there's some of that branding, but there's also a kind of intertextuality where you're taking an influencer from her page and putting her in a kosher restaurant that you could go to with your other favorite friends. Because what I have learned as a non-native to Instagram is that you feel really intimate with these women. Like, you follow them as their kids grow up, you're in their kitchens. Affectively, it's very intimate. I went to a really cool in-person event with Chalamam last winter. She came to New York in Midwood, and it was actually for, like, Russian mountain Jews. I forgot what they're called, Gorsky Jews. And so it's this Russian neighborhood, and she came from Israel, and she comes dancing in with a huge Israeli flag, and everyone's dancing, and then you all make challah together. And Miriam was there with her daughter. And I was like, oh, Miriam, like, you know, you feel this little frisson of like, oh, I know your family. So I think that's very profound, you know? But the collabs are very much, I think, business oriented, you know? And people like Miriam, like, make a living from this, and Razy Free too, like, she has a whole empire, and her husband is part of it, and he works with her. So I think it's really bringing Jewish Orthodox women together in an unexpected way that has a huge power, that is kind of this untapped spring. Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting stuff that you're talking about. I really have a lot of questions, but I'll ask one.
Okay.
I'll make a little comment. Because I'm overseeing this big survey here
Uh-huh.
And one of the things we found is that politics trumps religion in many ways.
Yes.
It's so much better predictor of what people are going to believe about them. It's easy to show that as well. But we'd be curious if they have followers who are Jewish but not from. You talked
Yeah.
about the Christian religion, but what about liberal Jews, non-from?
Yes.
And the other kind of question, somewhat related, is about the background of these influences. Do they come from families, or maybe people came to it later in life?
Those are great questions. So I will say that comments lately are tricky because they could be bots, right? Like, so I'm trying to be careful with like what comments I sort of count, and I'm trying to work with comments that the influencer responds to at least, so that, you know what I'm saying? But I have seen a lot of what seem to be secular Jewish women on these women's pages. I will tell you unofficially that all my anthropology friends don't follow these women but follow Ballerina Farm. So I know, and they follow a lot of Christian influencers. So I know that a lot of women find this, not the frum stuff, but the Christian material both fascinating and soothing. Like a lot of them use that language, soothing, because it's like baking bread and somebody at home making a beautiful home. So I think there's a surprising audience there. I can't 100% answer that about the secular Jews. It's not clear to me yet, you know? And the background is interesting. They're definitely not all Batshuvas. Most of them come from frum families. I mean, Miriam grew up sort of frum and then became frummer. Some of them became frummer. Some of them, like Rezi Fried, was a kind of like interesting, which is a bad word if you're Hasidic, interesting girl. So some of them were sort of, didn't quite fit the mold and then found their place. So my sense is that a lot of them are kind of what another local term is like out of the box. So women who are probably pretty creative and unusual for their communities and are finding this as a way to kind of channel some of that. But then you have some mainstream religious women, especially from Chabad. Like there are a lot of Chabad, and it's interesting to me because I see Chabad now, like I didn't used to have this view of Chabad, but I see them kind of on the forefront of a lot of change that trickles down into other communities in every sphere of life. And so it's unsurprising they've had a much longer relationship with social media that's less problematic. It's unsurprising that there's lots of Chabad influencers. Yeah. 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 No. Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's many more husbands in the Christian influencers and kids. There are kids in the frum influencers, but you rarely see husbands. Once in a while, Rezi Fried will go out to dinner on date night with her husband, and you see him for a second, but you barely hear him talking. So I think that, what could he have to say after all? She says a lot. I think that sort of speaks to the gendered separation in frum life, like the ways that men and women have really separate spheres of social life. Also, I think that Instagram is a real frum women's space, and so I don't see, like I even had to respond. Here's an example. I wanted to follow some woman, and she said, before you follow me, you need to leave me a voice note to show me that you're a woman, because there can be no men on my site. So I think it's, like, these are not women who are challenging orthodoxy. Like, they're modest frum women, and so it's a woman's space. It's almost like on one side of the mechitza, and that's where it stays. There was a lot of debate that I followed about whether you should show children or not. I think it's a broader social media debate, and some people block out their kids' faces. There are fewer kids in the Frum influencers than the Christian influencers. I think a part of the Christian message is really like the whole family is kind of iconic of this way of life. So you see, there are a lot of like portraits of the whole family on the farm, in front of the hay. You see, like even for Ballerina Farm, you see that husband, he has his own account, hog fathering, like you see him a lot, perhaps too much. But yeah, I think there's a difference there, and I think it speaks to those gender divisions. That's interesting. I have to think about that a little more. Yeah, Ayala? Yes. You mean the Frum influencers? No. No. So far, it's like all Israel all the way. Is that what you're asking me?
Well, I'm wondering if there's more complications within MAGA about
Yes.
spoken and about sort of discussions with Israel in very conspiratorial ways.
Yes.
How they deal with the fact that like being part of this group also means being part of the Carlson.
Right. So that's also really interesting to me. So I see a lot of changes on going to the Frum world too. So for a long time, not a long time, like a couple of, whatever, a year, when I first started going on Instagram, all the Frum women loved Candace Owens, right? Like they just loved her. Like I have posts of like, oh, she's so amazing. Candace Owens is a, Shachar, I'll tell you who she is. She is a media personality. She herself is an influencer, I guess, right? But she like did an about face and started making all these anti-Semitic comments. And so the Frum influencers had to kind of rethink what was going on, and there were a lot of posts about that, like she showed her true colors, or she turned on us, she shows what she's really made of. When Charlie Kirk was killed, Frum influencers were like, he's an amazing man, we love him, here, buy a kippah with him. Like, there was support for him all the way, but then I also followed like Melinda Strauss. Remember when Elon Musk, now it seems like a long time ago, did that theoretically Nazi salute? She did a whole interpretive thing on how it wasn't really a Nazi salute. So there's like a lot of interpretation about how to understand this shifting ground, I would say. And they're pretty agile, you know, which tells me also that they're completely locked in to what's going on. Right? Like, in order to be able to create these kinds of posts, you have to know. So the funny thing is a lot of influencers also, Christian and Jewish, often make posts about like, I'm taking time off from Instagram now for me time. You shouldn't be on your phone too much because you'll be a bad mother. And they're posting that as their real. So there's a lot of ambivalence is what I also see. But the Christian thing and the schisms in MAGA are really interesting, and I'm trying to follow that now. Yeah.
I'm struck by virtually no references in the show to rabbis.
Right.
You know, it's a further extension of virtually no men.
Right.
And I'm wondering about where are the rabbis? I mean, they came out against the internet for other reasons, sex abuse disclosures.
Right.
Pornography allegedly.
Yep.
In general, it's bad. Is it that the rabbis are tolerating this as benign, or is it that they're just helping you?
Yeah, that's interesting. So when I've asked people, like women, they're like, why would I talk to my rabbi? This has nothing to do with religion. Like, but in some ways it's not, because it's not really about halachic decisions. Like, that's fair. So their sense is wellness is not about religion. I think it is, but they don't see it that way. I've asked a number of like very Frum women, like, do you ask your husband? I just talked to somebody who was had a lot of vaccine hesitancy, and I was like, do you talk to your husband about your decision to not vaccinate? She's like, why would I? He just does what I said. This is my realm. So I think there's a sense that it's women's, like, taking care of their family. Again, that kind of like what you mentioned about why don't we see husbands. I think it's like women's sphere of authority. One mother said to me, we wipe the green noses. We know what to do. No one's telling us what to do. I also think that rabbis turn out to be I learned this from my last book, they turn out to be remarkably flexible when they need to be. And I think they tried to get women off social media. It failed. And they know I think it's worse for them to fail publicly than to just let this happen. You know what I mean? And so, I don't know, maybe they'll crack down, but I don't think they can, especially because there's an economic premise that this is how families make a living. And even like in super frum communities that don't allow the internet, if you need to use the internet for your business, you're allowed to. For some reason, the tablet has become a kind of neutral, value-free. It's really interesting to me, like women would say like, oh, no, I'm not on social media. I have a kosher flip phone. Yeah, I do shop on my husband's tablet. It's like, wait, isn't that the internet? But for some reason, it's not. I think the phone itself that you can explore so privately that can be put away and hidden is especially volatile.
Two follow-ups. One is Herschel Hirsch was running for position in Lakewood said, yes, it's on the phone, but it's a small screen, so it's a smaller error. Just as a follow-up is, I remember during the measles outbreak,
Yeah.
the women were defined rabbis,
Yes. Yes.
and it was pretty obvious.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which is why I think rabbis stopped. They sort of are very vague now. I mean, they have to say you should vaccinate because they get federal funding for the yeshivas, but they really don't dip their toe into that one because they know that women are going to do what they think is right. I have a lot of work on vaccination as a separate, and the measles epidemic in particular, and the kind of exchange of documents that happened through that, which is like another kind of mediation. But yeah, I think that it's like a kind of quiet revolution that's going on, and I'm sure they're aware of it, or their Askunim are telling them. I'm sure they're not on Instagram, but yeah, it's a very kind of murky realm for them, you know? Yeah, Deborah? Oh, yeah.
One more,
Okay. Hi.
I was considering that much of this conference about food and the differences between the Trump places and the Christian Muslim. I was wondering, are there conceivable differences of what constitutes a healthy food, considering that being healthy and being kosher are sometimes overlapping?
Or sometimes at odds, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm trying to figure that out right now. I think that, I think things first have to be kosher, right? There's like a hierarchy there. So it has to be kosher, and then you hope it's healthy. But, so I just talked to somebody who, who defines herself as a crunchy mom, and she said, yes, I buy all organic food. It was the first time I had ever heard that. There's an organic market near her in Muncie that she goes to. I know there's a lot of actually Amish produce and raw milk that's also connected to that. But she said, I said, so what does your Shabbos table look like? She said, I make everything from scratch. She said, it looks like a normal Shabbos table. It's just that I make things from scratch. So I don't think you have a lot of experimenting with foods. Another woman told me, like, we can't really eat kale. It's too hard to check. You know what I mean? Like for bugs, to make sure that it's kosher. And this crunchy mom also said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with organic frozen vegetables. That's fine. So I think sometimes it's aspirational to be healthy. And that's why I'm sort of thinking about, like, maybe kosher encodes its own idea of health. Like, maybe there's a different idea. It's not like going back to simple, like the Christians eat a lot of meat, right? Like a lot of meat, and there's an obsession with like beef tallow and stuff, and it's it's RFK's inverted pyramid, basically. Like they were very into that, of food pyramid. I don't see that being possible exactly if you're a kosher woman. Like she said, I would like to cook like that, but I can't because I have to have familiar food. And in fact, her husband, the woman I just spoke to, her husband eats his own food whenever he wants, and she gets really mad when he gives kids like American cheese, which he likes, like familiar, comfortable foods that he grew up with, sugar cereal, you know? But what I'm not seeing is like a revolution of kosher vegan. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's in some secular, more like traditional contexts, maybe. But I'm not seeing that with at least Haredi. I don't think Christian women follow from women. I don't think they know they exist. I'm trying really hard to interview some of them. So far, no one has answered me. I'll get there, but still. But I don't think that they're aware of that or that interested in that. Their project is really different. I think, and here's where I feel like it's really important to study Jews in this context. Like, this is a religious minority, right? Like, we talk a lot about Christian nationalism. There's a lot of research on Christian nationalism in the current political moment. But how does a religious minority kind of edge its way in there when it's not really recognized? It might be used and weaponized in lots of ways, but not really recognized as a parallel, equally important religion. And I think that's the bigger point of what I'm seeing is like, this is a Jewish project to join a certain political moment in the US. Thank you so much.